Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
Welcome, gentlemen. Welcome, everyone, to Live Line Upon Line, episode 509. The book of Daniel authenticates the divine revelation of the Bible. And tonight we have Jason and Michael and Dr. Ricks as always. So, Dr. Ricks, if you would start us out, that would be great.
Okay, we're going to use some more of those things that Churchill made famous where the ending's a little surprising. The secret of a good sermon is to have a good beginning and a good ending. Have the two as close together as possible. George Burns or the kid in the back row. Be careful about reading health books. You may die of a misprint. Mark Twain. By all means, marry. And if you get a good wife, live a happy life. If you get a bad one, become a philosopher. Socrates. A lot of philosophers out there. I was married by a judge. I should have asked for a jury. Groucho Marx. I've never hated a man enough to give his diamonds back. Zsa Zsa Gabor. And this one, being half Irish, well, anyway, whatever it is, 1/8 Irish, I like this one. Only Irish coffee provides the 4 essential food groups. They are alcohol, caffeine, sugar, and fat. Casey. And my luck is so bad that if I bought a cemetery, people would stop dying. Rodney Dangerfield. If you know about Rodney Dangerfield, it kind of makes sense. Anyway, or Don Rickles, that might be true of him too. Anyway, we're going to talk about how Daniel authenticates the divine revelation of the Bible. And it really does. Daniel reveals the grand sweep of world history with its accuracy. And it's, when you look at that book, especially chapters 7 through 11, but even chapter 2 and 3, it's amazing. You got to remember, except for little things about the beginning of the Persian Empire, it was all written in 539 or 540, depends how you slice the year, BC. It's unbelievable, the accuracy. And actually, I believe that the accuracy is headed down to our day as well. I believe that. I know you guys, we can't be sure, but I really think so. I think I can sense it. But let's go how it authenticates the Bible. The first thing that I noted when I thought about Daniel was, why did the devil was so determined to block this information about the coming of the Messiah, restoration of Israel, etc.? Why was the devil so determined to block this message? It's one of those interesting things. Ken, could you read Daniel 10:12, please?
Sure. Do not fear, Daniel, for from the first day that you set your heart to understand and to humble yourself, and I have come because of your words. But the prince of the kingdom of Persia withstood me 21 days. And behold, Michael, one of the chief princes, came to help me. With the kings of Persia, now I have come to make you understand what will happen to your people.
You know, the thing about that is so interesting thing is, for 3 weeks, they resisted the will of God. I'm not, obviously God maybe could have done more things, but isn't that a bit of a shock when you first read it?
Yeah, when you apply it in today's terms, especially when you consider, for him it's contemporary. This is a battle going on, over the minds and hearts of people that are living, that are making important decisions at the at the apex of the world government at that point in time. It's really it's kind of fascinating to think of what other things I suppose could be influenced one way or the other by that sort of thing.
It's like a titanic struggle with spirit beings. I know we can't see the spiritual dimension unless they want us to see it. That's the way at least it comes out in the Bible when you look at Elisha the prophet about the chariots of fire. You can't see it, but chariots of fire, don't you? I think, how do spirit beings fight? Do they have something like a laser sword of spiritual energy? I mean, that's what my mind thinks of. I don't know. Has that thought ever occurred to you, Jason? How do spirit beings fight with each other?
I mean, it's, I'm sitting here listening to this, and I was thinking, and it reminds me of Ephesians 6 and 12. I turned over there real quick, but it's, for us, it says, we're not wrestling against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness, spiritual hosts of wickedness in heavenly places. That's stuff that's going to be in the psyche. It's in the mind, but how that plays out in the spirit world, it's something to consider. I always try to think of things that, I think we get distracted by the here and the now in this realm, and we sometimes forget that there is a high court up there. There are influences, there are things that are happening behind the scenes, and it's always that scripture right there. And I'll try to remember that to help keep me grounded and know. It's kind of like the focusing that David had when he fought Goliath. David's eyes didn't lie to him. This was an 11-foot man, that weighed, he was huge, and he was probably saying things a lot more graphic than we read in here. And he was being very ugly, but David's mind was above what he was seeing in front of him. And he was able to say, how are you going to try to defy the God of, the true living God, and kept his mind right. We can get into some pretty crazy situations sometimes, but if we keep ourselves grounded with knowing there's a real situation that's, much more critical than what we see here going on. That's kind of the thought that popped in my mind.
Good thought. When you read Ezekiel or Isaiah, where it describes Satan's rebellion against God, and really the real prince of Babylon and Tyre, when you read into it, because eventually he's at the Garden of Eden. Well, obviously the prince of Babylon wasn't there, Satan was. It's like Satan is really influencing the Babylonian Empire. He's really in charge. We just don't see it. And Daniel is there, and he sees that empire. Well, even if it's transitioning into the Persian, he sees that trying to block what it wants to do. But doesn't that show you how important the book of Daniel was, that the devil went to that much trouble?
Yes. Very, very much.
Like pulling out your heavy artillery. And had to send the archangel that stands for the people of Israel to block that spiritual blockade of information to Daniel. And we're going to see, as we look at Daniel, though we can't cover the whole book in one short discussion, but you can read it and read the commentaries that go with it. You'll be amazed at all the stuff that's in the book of Daniel. Ken, could you read 9:20, please?
While I was speaking, praying, and confessing my sin and the sin of my people Israel before the Lord my God, yes, while I was speaking in prayer, the man Gabriel, whom I had seen in the vision at the beginning, reached me.
So this subject is so important. He sent an archangel to break the blockade and get that message to Daniel. And Daniel has many prophecies. We're just going to talk about a few of them this evening. But I want to talk about one of them, just brief, the 70 weeks prophecy. Now, obviously, this is a tricky prophecy. We're going to talk about the part that I think is proves to be fairly well nailed down. That last 3.5 years, or the last 7 could apply to the tribulation. It could be applied to a lot of things going to happen in the end time. So we'll kind of leave that off for a minute because that's out in the future. But we're going to talk about the 70 years prophecy. Can you read Daniel 9:24, please, Ken?
70 weeks are determined for your people and for your holy city, to finish the transgression, to make an end to sins, to make reconciliation for iniquity, restore and build Jerusalem until Messiah the Prince and
62 weeks, and they're going to restore the Messiah. Could you go ahead and read chapter 10, 11?
And he said to me, O Daniel, man greatly beloved, understand the words that I speak to you, for I have now been sent.
Okay. I'm going to jump a little bit ahead, but you can read it all. If you have a year for a day in the 72 weeks, and the last week, it's 69 weeks to the coming of the Messiah the first time. So if you multiply 69 times 70, you get 483 years. And it's asserted 457 was the last decree for all this things that go to Judah. You get 26 AD. When you got to put an extra year in for 0 because it goes, 0 from BC to AD, or I think it's now the Common Era, but same principle. So you add the 1 year, 27 AD. So that's when Jesus started his ministry. You move 3.5 years, middle of the week. He dies at 31 AD. That fits perfectly with how we see it. Some may have a year or two difference. You can play with it. But Daniel knew, within 500-year period, pretty close to that, when the Messiah would come the first time. Isn't that amazing when you think about it?
Very.
If you go back 5 centuries in our history, you're practically back into the age of Shakespeare, aren't you? Give or take. You see how far, I'm going to give you a sense of the time.
Yeah.
From Shakespeare's, isn't that about 5 centuries? 1611, 1618, 16 Shakespeare's days till now. About 5. So you realize how far in the future he made this prediction. And for those people, and there are critics who don't like Daniel because it verifies the Bible, and if you're a secular critic, especially in a seminary or cemetery, in a major university, you actually get published if you can print out debunking the Bible, not supporting it for the most part. That's the new trend. Well, I guess it's been that way for a number of years now. So they don't want to accept Daniel. They're looking for any way to knock it. But I'm going to ask Ken to read Matthew 24. Then we're going to come to the big question.
And this gospel of the kingdom will be preached in all the world as a witness to all the nations, and then the end will come. Therefore, when you see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet standing in the holy place, whoever reads, let him understand.
Here's the point I want to just discuss for a minute. Who verifies the authenticity of Daniel? Isn't it Jesus Christ and the apostles who wrote up what Christ said? So if you go with the critics say, Daniel must be some elaborate forgery, a super, super elaborate forgery, because he couldn't know all that stuff. How can you be a Christian because Christ authenticated Daniel?
Yeah, it would be a problem.
Either you don't believe the Bible or Christ at all. You might as well be, I'm not knocking it, you might as well be a Buddhist, a Hindu, an animist, or voodoo. I mean, you can't believe in Christ and not accept Daniel. And and you can, it's the desolation of the temple is mentioned more than once in Daniel. It's mentioned once when it happened, 168 BC, but it's also referenced further in on chapter 11 toward the end time, just before the final beast comes. And people will say, well, but there's no temple now. It can't be desecrated. Do you realize that when Daniel wrote this, there was no temple? He was between the destruction of the first temple and the building of the second temple. I think this is true. When they were just getting ready to think about going back to Jerusalem, Daniel was like 85, too old to make that arduous trip. He said, I can do you more good here at the emperor's side than making that trek. As far as we know, he passed away shortly after that. Daniel never saw the second temple. So it doesn't matter whether the temple exists now or not. It didn't exist when Daniel wrote it up either. And it is going to happen. I really believe it. Maybe it'll happen differently than we think. And we could kick around some theories. By the way, you want to hear one theory about the temple I heard, just as somebody speculating?
Yes.
And I realize it's a pure speculation, but we don't mind speculation as long as we tell you it's speculation. By the way, prophecy is not doctrine. The church doesn't have a whole lot of, we don't have doctrines based on prophecy per se, because we could be wrong, or you realize prophecies can change. Paul said prophecies can fail. For instance, if America and Judah and Britain have substantial repentance, some things about Jacob's trouble God won't do. Does that make sense? Repentance could change the trajectory of prophecy. I mean, it wouldn't change everything, but it could change some things. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but it happened for Nineveh. Anyway, here's the way the theory goes. Little Israel in the Middle East needs a patron for big-time weapons and all that sort of thing. America's been that patron. By the way, you might not know this, in 1948, almost all nations in the world, not even included Great Britain, were pressuring for Israel, maybe 100,000 or so Jews in the Middle East, but we got to cut off the flow. The Arabs don't want a big Jewish state there. We can't do it. Harry Truman, on his own, because America was the big stick then, we got the UN to give it to them. And by the way, most of the land was still given to Arabs who lived in the area, that land they were taken away from Jordan. So there was a two-state solution. As you all know, that didn't work well. They tried to destroy Israel. But America is the reason Israel exists. We've been their major supplier. Well, what if in the future America becomes more and more fickle?
It'll be like now, future. Israel? In the future? You seen the news lately?
By the way, I heard this on the radio. I don't know if what you hear is true. They said Tony Blinken went over Israel and told Netanyahu, you got to stop the war, peace deal, pull back, get all your troops out of Gaza. And America means business. And he ran into a stone wall. Netanyahu didn't want to discuss it, didn't want to talk to him. In a sense, said a diplomatic no. Now, I don't know, did anybody else hear anything like that?
I did not read the details of his visit in there. I did not read anything about that. I don't know.
It wouldn't surprise me a bit, because we've got an election coming up and half his base is anti-Semitic. So, yeah.
Right.
So at least he can tell them, we tried to get Israel to pull out. Now, I'm sure America's pressure will affect them. But here's the point. Let's say if somewhere in the future America gets more and more fickle and Israel has no international support like they need, and all of a sudden a European Holy Roman Empire develops in Europe, it becomes all powerful, has diplomatic clout, all kind of power. Israel's desperate for a supporter, and the leader, we'll call him the beast, but whatever his exact title, the most high emperor of the Holy Roman Empire, says, we haven't done right by Israel in the past. He may be German, Italian, whatever. We will take care of you. Israel will be so desperate, they'll feel no qualms. And then he will come in and put a military protective ring around Judah, and also diplomatically, because he'll have a lot of diplomatic power, protect them from pressure from other nations. And he says, I give you permission to do what you really want to do. Go ahead and build the third temple. With that protective ring and the diplomatic protection the beast can give them, they build the third temple. And things go along for maybe 2 or 3 years. And well, we all know what we think will happen then, right?
Mm-hmm.
Does that seem plausible, Ken, as a theory?
Sure. I don't see why not.
I thought the lack of the traditional support from us, yeah, it's going to lead to support from other places. Germany, I read this last week, has ever since the incident with Khashoggi and Saudi Arabia, they've cut off selling weapons to Saudi Arabia. Well, stuff is serious enough now that it's like they've reconsidered and they're going to start supplying them again. I just feel like that need exists, and there's a lot of, I guess, pro-Israel sentiment in Germany. I don't know if that's the best way to put it. Islam on their own. There was something somehow over there. The states have something to do with the immigration, with the naturalization process for immigrants. And one of the German states was writing like recognition of the state of Israel into the naturalization process. I.e., you're not going to come in here if then you're going to go around, advocating that Israel has no right to exist or something like that. I just thought that was an odd, very direct alliance in allying that issue to citizenship. Even, maybe it's a way to keep certain people out from taking that oath. Maybe it's intended to be exclusionary, but even so, it's sort of telling where their mindset is at.
Germany could convince them, we're kind of make up for the past by being your friend as a leader inside the EU.
Well, Germany's
Europe.
Germany's starting to stand out as kind of a ally of Israel, and it's kind of strange how it's all we've known this stuff was going to come, and but seeing it start to unfold is kind of, I don't know, all inspiring, humbling. It's weird to see. Well, yeah, okay. we weren't just talking. Now we're looking at it.
Yeah.
It fits Daniel, by the way. I know there's a lot of Daniel we won't go, but it does fit Daniel. And just want to mention that. By the way, do you know that the prophets said that Cyrus, about 100 years before he did it, before he was born, he was named by the prophets, and Daniel had it too, that he would order the rebuilding of Jerusalem and the temple before it happened. I mean, before Syria even, before the Persians came to power, which is interesting. And a lot of people could argue, well, Daniel was there, although toward the waning years of the Babylonian Empire, maybe he just guessed things about the Persian Empire. That seems a bit of a stretch. For instance, in Daniel said they had 2 horns. The one that was on top at first declined, and the one that was at the bottom got to be the longer one. Now, the Medes and the Persians conquered Babylon. The Medes led at first, but ultimately, in the end, it was the Persians who dominated. Now, I realize that's just a horn position thing, but how did Daniel know that far in advance? They're little things, but it's those dramatic details that are a bit of a surprise. And you can see that in Daniel 9:27 and in Daniel 11 about the temple and that sort of thing. Let's look at the world empires and the details that Daniel knew about the world empires that I think are important. Ken, could you read Daniel 7:1-3?
In the first year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon, Daniel had a dream and visions. I saw in my vision by night, and behold, the four winds of heaven were stirring up the great sea, and four great beasts came up from the sea, each different from the other.
And it's interesting that you had four world ruling empires that came up in what we would call the center of the world, which is roughly the Middle East, Europe, and I guess Persia and that little part of India. The rest of the world we consider the Orient of the New World, kind of out of what I call what we most people would consider the center of the world. So only four great empires came out. Daniel named them far in advance. Babylon, was like the winged lion. By the way, did you know the British Museum on Discoveries? And we watched several archaeological shows. And I don't remember the details, didn't get them all right now. But somewhere in the 1830s, they dug through mounds of Nineveh and mounds of the Babylonian Empire, and they found these statues, and some are in the rubble in Babylon near Baghdad to this very day. You can find lions with wings on their back, and in some case, a human head, like maybe Nebuchadnezzar's head, on all these great, gigantic pillars in Babylon. Then there's the Medo-Persian Empire, like a bear, slow and ponderous, and he took down three ribs and three empires he took down, and I think we name them in the paper: Egypt, Lydia, and I forgot the other one, and the Neo-Babylonian Empire. So the Persian Empire became a great empire for a while, and there. By the way, do you know the Persian Empire were the first ones to do the Pony Express? I thought that was an American idea. And actually, it started right here in the state of Missouri. Now, at least this is what I understand. In Kansas City, that's as far as the railroads and the telegraph line went at the beginning of the process. They would have news from Washington and New York, and these guys, every so many miles, they had a station. They could change horses, and the same rider could and then eventually change riders, and that pouch would get pretty good speed all the way to California. Well, the Persian Empire had that because they had 120 sub-states from India to on the western side of Egypt and into Ethiopia and deep into Europe. That's a lot of space. I mean, in those days. And they had a Pony Express. Would you have believed that was their idea originally?
I read Marco Polo once upon a time, and he described a type of Pony Express in the Mongol Empire with Genghis Khan and all that. They had a similar system where riders would trade and you could get messages pretty quickly across a very vast empire. Smart stuff.
Yeah. So a lot can be said for them. And then, of course, he comes with the Greek Empire. Now, we didn't put all the scriptures in, but the goat and the ram represent the two. The big one is it starts off with someone coming with a gigantic horn who moves horn represents government and power. He moves so fast, it's like he doesn't even touch the ground. And he just smashes the Persian Empire and stomps all over it. He's unstoppable. And of course, you realize that's Alexander the Great. Mm-hmm. That's almost 300 years in advance. Daniel writes about him. That'd be like going to 1770s or the French and Indian War from the present. And that's pretty much great insight, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was trying to think of what's 500 years? Well, you think about like 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue or something like that. We're not much beyond that when you consider, the bulk of North and South America being, virtually unknown to the civilized world as of that period of time ago. It's huge. It's a huge chunk of history.
Yeah. So nearly 300 years he predicted, and Alexander was unstoppable. And then suddenly, at the height of his strength, the horn is broken. And usually a great king, his son and widow become the keep it going. Not he had a son about I think 9 or 10 years old. He and his wife were well, they were murdered in the plots to such a great empire. Everybody wants that kind of power that he had. He had conquered the whole world in an unbelievably fast period of time. Um, how did Daniel figure that out? And guess what came out of it? He said four horns to the four winds would come out of that great empire of the what we call it, the flying goat with the big horn. However you want to look at it, out of Alexander's empire, and sure enough, the king of the north, south, east, and west came out of it. Um, that is quite remarkable, isn't it?
Pretty
And
spot
there's no
on.
way he could have guessed that. Go ahead, Michael.
Oh, I was just saying, it gets to be too much for just, if he were just making things up, if he were just taking a whack at what he thought it was going to happen. It's too many details in a row, that once it becomes less and less, probable that you're going to hit the nail on the head, as it were, especially a complex situation like that.
And then, of course, there's the Roman Empire. And I listed in my little chart as the Iron Monster that crushes all opposition. I was listening to one historian who was writing up, a lot about the Roman Empire, which lasted a long time. But the Roman Empire, their legions were like weapons of mass destruction. And and that's what I mean by iron. By the way, the Iron Chancellor from Germany, and the highest military award in Germany is the Iron Cross. Do you see any parallels here?
Mm-hmm.
And in the history of the Holy Roman Empire, often the military, the point of their military spear were from German states. I mean, that's pretty much Otto the Great, and I had to rattle off a whole bunch of names, but you get the general idea. Um, and what they did to Carthage, it was a long war, but eventually, I'm going into details. They destroyed it, and a matter of fact, I have a theory that when you hear about the Bible, it's often called the land of milk and honey, rolling hills with there were deserts, there was that desert that's up northwest of them between them and the Tigris Euphrates, but most of the land was described in the Bible days as beautiful hills, great valleys, fabulous crops. What at least one of my teachers thought happened to it was when the Romans in 70 AD, and then they had a later war with the Jews in 135, and they got tired of all this mess, they decided to destroy not just the city of Jerusalem and burn the temple. They plowed salt and just destroyed the landscape like an iron monster. And when they got through with the Middle East, it was not the beautiful place it had been before.
You can read some of that even in the Bible. I believe I was reading in Second Kings this last week, somewhere right around the time of Elijah and Elisha, and armies come and they chop down all the trees. Every man take a stone and fill the ground with stones so it can't be used anymore. That destruction, that way of not just putting them down temporarily, but keeping them down essentially afterwards, making sure that it was never like it was before. And Rome did that to Carthage as well, didn't they, Dr. Riggs? Didn't they sow salt and just make it?
There's even theories that part of North Africa was green far out into the Sahara Desert. I mean, back in those days. When the Romans got through with Carthage, the desert just pushed in because they destroyed, they just, their level of destruction of Carthage is shocking. And that's why you can look at it as an iron monster. And Well, let's read Daniel 7:13, Ken. Get a little of it. Because I think Daniel 7:13, we can see a little bit of how these things came about. Oh, well, read this one. This is what will happen in the end. We'll get to Daniel later. Keep
Okay.
reading. Do sit Daniel 7:13.
7:13. One like the Son of Man coming with the clouds of heaven. He came to the Ancient of Days, and they brought him near. Brought them near him. Then to him was given dominion and glory and a kingdom that all peoples should serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion which shall not pass away, kingdom the one which shall not be destroyed.
Okay. Yeah, I want to say that before we get into it. Goodness wins in the end. It's good to remember that. Goodness wins in the end. Could you go to Daniel 7:4 and 5, please, Ken?
The first was like a lion and had eagle's wings. I watched till its wings were plucked off, and it was lifted up from the earth and made to stand. And a man's heart was given to it. And suddenly another beast, a second like a bear, it was raised up on one side, and had 3 ribs in its mouth between. And they said, "Arise, devour much."
We kind of discussed that already. Although the defeat of Babylon is an unbelievable story. You know, the walls of Babylon were so thick, you could turn a chariot team around on the wall. They had parapets thick. It was really high. It was considered, there's no way you could break through. But the Medes and the Persians, they diverted a river upstream so that they could, because the river ran through Babylon, but it had big iron gates. But it was deep in the water. But once you got the water out, your army could walk under the gates. I thought, wow, no one would have ever imagined that's how Babylon would fall. But God said it was going to fall, or Daniel through God, it fell.
It's very interesting, what you said earlier. I was going to say, but looking at all these different stages here, it's that same ancient pagan belief system, religion, the counterfeit of what people think is what you're supposed to believe in. It's just like under different authorities with mankind, it's stages of it going through there. But what you said was real interesting about how Rome destroyed all that area. And we just read right here, but it says, he came, the Ancient of Days brought him near, that all people should serve his dominions and everlasting dominion, which shall not pass, in his kingdom, one which shall not be destroyed. And you see all this stuff, and what you're talking about is just, that is Satan's purpose, and although we talked about the land being destroyed, all this is an attempt to destroy God's plan to create after himself. When you think about it in the big picture, it's like, it's a diversion. And I talked to a lot of people who are of the Catholic belief, and that's well pounded into their head to think that that's the right way, and it's I guess it's the same song and dance. It's just maybe a little bit different tune through the years, but it's continued, and God wants to. It's real interesting. I'm having a good time listening to what y'all are saying, because this is just really, really good. But go ahead.
I think that's poignant, Jason. The spiritual battles that we talked about earlier are often over people's minds. What you said, what does Satan want to destroy? He wants to destroy God's plan. In the garden, it was getting at Eve to get at Adam to cause them to fall, to create enmity between them and God, to push them off path. And that's a lot of the struggle, to keep people deceived, to keep them in the wrong spot, in a rut, in a bad habit or something like that, and keep the truth from them. And in this book of Daniel, what was being prevented? This amazing message, this vindicating message for the Bible and its history and what it tells us about the future, was trying to be kept from people, because if you understand it, you can study it and appreciate it. It's a tremendous support to your faith and to the plan of God, and that's certainly not something that the adversary wants.
Right. Absolutely.
And in a way, I think the devil, like you said, Jason, loves to keep us in one more or less false religion. It's kind of all the same system with different wrinkles on it. Keep you in false religions. And I think the devil really doesn't care in some ways who wins a war. Or maybe he has his own plans, but what he wants most is see you and him kill each other.
Yes.
You know, and I think as the closer we get to the end times, the more difficult the spiritual battle will be for us. I think maybe we won't recognize it, maybe, but I just think it's going to get more difficult for us to be. I mean, that's our. I mean, it's easy to, especially for a man, to physically battle against something, but when you got to guard your thoughts and your actions, it's difficult. And I think it'll get more difficult the closer we get because the pressure is going to get much harder. We just got to be on guard all the time.
That's true. You know, I say this, you know, I've said this before, but I think I said this maybe last time we were on here, but the easy part about true Christianity is the observances in the day, the fundamental parts of Christianity. You know, once you figure, you know, once you, and if we have God's Holy Spirit that helps with that conviction in our heart. But keeping the Sabbath is not a hard thing, you know, observing the holy days, tithing, eating correctly. The hard part about this is whenever you get to having to search our souls and get all the corruption out of there and the deep thoughts that are, you know, getting my mind right. And like we were talking before, but challenges that might cause us to bend when we know we shouldn't. And you know, you read in here where it says, "And I did not come to bring peace, but a sword between family members." And I asked somebody this question today because we were talking about marriage and stuff like this, and kind of brought a question in that I was trying to be funny, but I said, "So you get married? Are you supposed to love your wife more, no, or is a husband supposed to love his wife more or his mother?" You know, I was just kind of playing with somebody, but then I said, "Who are you supposed to love the most?" And that's why I was swinging that question. And I said, "There's an answer to that. It's God." You know, because you know we think of like we think about the here and the now, but you know He wants to know. It's just like the test that was given to Abraham, and he said, "Now I know." He did not withhold anything, not even his only son. And it's huge when you think about what the Father did. I think a lot of times we just think the sacrifice of Christ, but it tells us that God gave his only begotten son. They had been together, never had ever been not together. And then there was a chance he could have lost his eternal life. That's what a lot of people don't really want. He had the option. The option to sin was on the table. Now, he didn't do it. He didn't want to. But that if you don't think that that was a possibility, then you don't really understand the true sacrifice that was given to us to obtain salvation. It was real. It wasn't phony baloney. It was real. And I mean, that's, you know, when you start getting it, that's a relationship we're supposed to have with God, is to understand that. And nothing comes before him to us. And, you know, that's why it's very important that people who understand this, and I tell this to young people, that's why he tells us to marry within this religion, because when that works together, you can't argue about things, you know, because you both look towards God. Makes a marriage work. I guess I went on too long there.
But yeah, that reminds me of something, and we'll talk about it one of these days. There's a doctrine that some churches have called once saved, always saved. Once you mutter certain words, and I think there's some other religions, you mutter certain words and you're set for paradise regardless of what happens afterwards. And they can even do evil things, and if the evil things are done in the favor of the empire of this religion, that doesn't matter. You realize there are tons of scriptures to tell you that we are at risk. Paul, the apostle, was at risk. I mean, just so, and to me, that tells me our reward has to be fabulous, because why put us at risk for a mediocre reward of just sitting around shuffling harp music for all eternity? So it's got to
When
be
I
a
was
great
young,
reward. Yes.
when I was young, we went to the Episcopalian church when I was young, and I remember,
You're
you
still
know,
young, but it's all relative.
but that sitting around on a cloud playing harp music, I can remember as a kid, because I didn't, I just, my idea of heaven was just something that was just, I didn't want to go. I wanted to stay here.
Sorry, I just never heard anybody say. That's funny though. That's what a kid would think. That sounds boring.
It sounds horrible. I wanted to stay with my family. I wanted, we went to Nana's on Sunday and ate dinner. We did these different things, but I felt like I would be alone and unhappy thinking about that. That's just horrible.
You didn't want to go.
Oh man.
Well, it's all very interesting. Ken, would you read Daniel 7:7, please, for us?
Absolutely. After this I saw in the night visions, and behold, a fourth beast, dreadful and terrible, exceedingly strong, and had huge iron teeth, that was devouring, breaking in pieces, and trampling the residue with its feet. It was different from all the beasts that were before it, and had 10 horns. I was considering the horns, and there was another horn, a little one, before whom 3 of the first horns were plucked out by the roots. And there, in this horn, were eyes like the eyes of a man, and a speaking. We got our fill of those kind of.
Well, the interesting thing is the iron teeth. And as I mentioned, Rome lasted, you could say maybe 9 centuries as a republic, and then went into a they still kept the Senate. So it was still a republic, but it was more like a dictator with the Caesars in charge. But from a republic to a semi-dictatorship for about 9 centuries. And then when Rome fell, per se, it kept bouncing back as the Holy Roman Empire with different rulers. And I can't remember all the names. I didn't write a bunch of them down, but you can look them up. By the way, even during the American Revolution, this will surprise you, because it kind of surprised me. The King of England was an elector of the Holy Roman Empire, because in his marriages, the royal houses in Europe intermarried. One of those cousin connections, he was an elector in one of the states, one of the many Germanic states. Now, it wasn't just Hesse, but there were some others, but Hesse was the main one. So he needed extra soldiers, he brought in German mercenaries called Hessians. Well, they came from the Holy Roman Empire. Actually, in one battle, as I understand it, after you won a battle, the soldiers got to run around the countryside and loot and take stuff. That was part of, and that's historically the way it worked for many centuries. It wasn't new. You got to, when it got to America, and they wanted, you can't do that. We don't do that over here. I mean, that's what the British were telling the Haitian troops. But our troops are expected to get some extra stuff. We won. Anyway, we're going to all that. The point is, the Holy Roman Empire now Britain was a greater empire, but it was still in the middle of Europe. In other words, the Roman Empire might have gotten weaker at different times. It went up and down in power, but it has always existed. Even Hitler and Mussolini called their empire the Holy Roman Empire, and they used Roman Empire division insignia. I forgot the exact word. You see them on a little pole. Those are from Roman legions, and Mussolini wanted them with the Germans and the Italians in World War II. And that's actually where the word fascist came from. That fascia was the thing from the Roman Empire. My point is, the Roman Empire was different than the others. It lasted longer. And, the EU was caused by the Treaty of Rome created the EU, at least the beginnings of it. It's grown, I realize, it gotten bigger and bigger, but it's still an attempt to gain a European Holy Roman Empire again. And so it's maybe it's not the final form it's take is not what we have now, but it's still not exactly dead either.
Those old, I've seen the flags from the First Reich, I think, but you've seen the one that has those eagles or whatever birds they are, and it reminds me of this is Revelation 18, verse 2, and he cried mightily with a loud voice, saying, Babylon the great has fallen, it has become a dwelling place of demons, a prison for every foul spirit, and a cage for every unclean and hated bird. And you've seen those birds on those flags that they flew. I mean, that's pretty interesting.
They do like scrawny birds of prey, don't they? With the claws all out like
yes.
that. Yeah. And they wear it on some of their uniform helmets. And it's just an interesting, the Roman Empire was different. Well, how would Daniel know that so far in advance? And something else that you said, Michael, remember in the end, he talks about the Roman Empire at the very end time. It has two legs. How did Daniel know the Roman Empire would divide into East and West? Because even if you say that the book of Daniel is a counterfeit and the Jews wrote it maybe in 140 BC after certain things had happened, and they put in this detailed update. There's no way Daniel could have known that, could he? Mm. That was another almost 1,500 years.
Yeah, I thought that was an interesting point in the notes here. And there's a schism in Christianity, the Roman Catholic Church, but then there's also the Orthodox Church, right? Which the history of Rome is complicated. Constantine moved it to move the capital over to what we would call Turkey now, and built Constantinople. It's now Istanbul. It's still the center of that version of Christianity, I suppose. The Patriarch of Constantinople. I think it's the Patriarch of Constantinople. I think his name is Bartholomew. He's considered, first among equals, which is what they called the Pope for a long time, at the beginning and all that. Bishop of Rome is the first among equals as well. It's another half. I guess it got me thinking about if these are the two halves, is it significant that one leg is one and one leg is the other? There's a lot of nations. The Eastern Orthodox religion, it prevails among Christianity in like Russia, Belarus, Serbia, Bulgaria, Greece, Moldova, Romania, Ukraine, all those places. And if you're thinking about this being some sort of amalgamation at the end, is that indicative of where a certain portion of that is going to come from necessarily? I don't know.
Yeah, it does make me wonder, because you look at a country like Austria-Hungary, they're still Catholic, right? But some of their sections used to be Eastern Orthodox, but they fought over all that stuff. And with Albania and Serbia, and now it's Yugoslavia, because the borders of the names have changed.
Oh no! Now it's Serbia again.
Oh, it's Serbia again. Okay.
You're behind. Right? No. Oh man, sorry, that's funny. There's trouble over there right now too. Serbia is very pro-Russian for the most part, and the way that Yugoslavia broke up, it's causing a lot of problems in Kosovo. The Serbs there are trying to exert their independence and join Serbia and all this stuff, and it seems minor to us. It's not even a newsworthy thing over here for the most part. But Yugoslavia is what kicked off World War I. The assassination of an Austrian, the crown prince, essentially, right? Archduke. He was the crown prince. The to-be leader was sniped by a Serbian, and boom, world goes crazy. It doesn't take a whole lot sometimes.
And what we think is that they'll put this unwieldy empire together in the end time. It'll be feet of that, the end time, feet of iron and clay. There'll be stronger military countries led by Germany, and the clay countries. Well, I could name some names, but I guess be kind not to. But you see the pattern in World War II, which ones are clay and which ones are iron. And this amalgamation will hold together just long enough to fulfill Bible prophecy. Maybe 3.5 years, maybe at the most 7 years. It won't be a long thing, but just long enough to fulfill prophecy, because they really don't mesh together, because iron and clay don't mesh. And you look at all those countries in Europe, we've named a few, they really don't mesh. But the devil and the false prophet will somehow get them all to agree to give him power for a short period to fulfill Bible prophecy.
It definitely shows you that it's going to be cobbled together. It's going to be a quick, because it's going to be a quick fix, because he knows he has a short time. He's going to throw this together as quick as possible. It's going to be loosely gathered and combined, and it's just not going to hold. Yeah. I don't know if this has any significance. The Roman Empire really hasn't gone away. The religious aspect of the Roman Empire still exists. Political, pretty much dissolved off, but the Catholic religion, which was born out of the Roman Empire, that part of it in Rome still exists. And whoever crowns this coming king might just be that the Pope or the
Super Pope.
No, well, tell the biblical term they call him, the false prophet. I think that's it. Anyway, but he'll probably, if there is a crowning that takes place, it'll probably be that part of the Roman Empire that still exists that does the crowning, just like you get old, it gets bad, it gets worse. Help me out, Dr. Ricks.
Like Napoleon.
There we go.
I tell you, we got to go to Versailles, and it's this gigantic portrait, and Versailles is big anyway. And it shows a picture of Napoleon and the Pope, and they got the crown. Now, suppose, according to the picture in the story, Napoleon was so arrogant, he took the crown out of the Pope's hands and put it on his own head. I mean, the Pope approved it, that he was now the big wig in Europe, supported by the church. But Napoleon was so arrogant, I'm putting the crown on myself. I hope I'm accurate in describing. Some French people might say, oh, you're over-exaggerating. I like the way Napoleon. Gotta get that French nasal.
And
Napoleon.
while Hitler wasn't crowned, the Pope did go over there and kind of condone his taking over of Germany in that. There was something to.
Yeah, that Pope had been the cardinal in charge of Germany, German Catholics, before he got to be Pope. And I think it was Pope Pius XII. I'll get my name right. You got to realize that most of Europe was 90-some% Catholic. And what most Americans forget, anti-Semitism got stirred up so badly that countries like France and many others were cooperating and isolating the Jews and funneling them to the death camps. And like many of those gendarmes in France, the Polish police in Austria and Italy, they had to know what was going on. They couldn't be that out of it. Does that make sense?
I mean, we're kind of seeing it. This is the last generation to witness anti-Semitism start. I mean, they're pretty much at the end, and here we're seeing it all repeat itself all over again. And who's over there right now? Who did we just bomb? Yemen? Who was it? Yemen.
The Houthis, yeah, in Yemen, yeah.
Who is it? It's England. It's the United States in defense of
Israel.
So
yeah,
it's Ephraim, Manasseh, and Judah, so to speak. I mean, people don't see this. I mean, that's the first thing I see when I hear the news, that what's going on here, and nobody gets.
And which ally has America been able to count on, and England been able to count on? Each other.
Yeah.
Even during the Iraq War, England was the only country that really put in a number of troops to help out, at least from my perspective. Um, and Churchill said all along that he's going to win the war with America's help. And you can argue about details, but you can see that America and Britain have been allies when the chips were down.
Brothers.
One other thing to kind of support, I mean, I'm hearing this more and more every day, is this bringing up of aliens to support the final return of Christ and how they're going to get these armies to fight him. I mean, they're just putting this in people's heads all the time now.
Oh, extraterrestrials, not illegal
Not the
aliens.
illegals. No, not those aliens. No, the other aliens.
Be clear here.
They come from a little further away than the others.
I mean, I heard they were busing in places, but I didn't know that.
Well, they used the bus from what was that, Spaceballs or whatever.
Oh man.
No, but I'm hearing a lot of this. I mean, crazy stuff. You know, in the mainstream people, you would never have heard stuff from. I'm hearing people talking about extraterrestrials, aliens. I was like, oh, come on, and we know what that is. We all know.
Yeah, the demons are getting us ready for something big and bad. Let's go to 2 Thessalonians 2, please, Ken.
Let no one deceive you by any means, for that day will not come unless the falling away comes first, and the man of sin is revealed, the son of perdition, who opposes and exalts himself above all that is called God, or that is worshipped, so that he sits as God in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God.
Now remember, by the way, you'll see that in Daniel in more than one place, where he talks about the man, the pompous little horn with eyes, man and a big mouth that speaks pompous words. Well, the New Testament telling you that. And if you read chapter 11 of Daniel, it talks about the king in the south and the north with details that cannot be guessed at. Just all kinds of details back and forth. It's got all kinds of things about the Egyptian princess. What was her name? All of a sudden it skipped my mind. Oh, well. Cleopatra, yes. Actually, there are two Cleopatras. Anyway, all those details are in there. So critics say there's no way Daniel could have known those details. And everything happened up until you get to the end of chapter 11, and it switches to the end time, when there'll be one more pompous man saying it. And it fits with the New Testament verse we just read. I just want to end with a short discussion of if the Jews were going to update the book of Daniel and create a counterfeit book, think of how difficult that would be, because they had more than one synagogue. They were scattered throughout the world, and they had synagogues in various places. They'd have to send the guy saying, have you all got a copy of the scroll of Daniel? Yeah, it's one of our favorites. Well, turn it in. We got to update it. What? Then with a few centuries later, got to update it again. Do you see how hard that would be and how that would just not work out? And also, when they got some of the Dead Sea Scrolls and other things, they find evidence of Daniel that they can physically go back to a century, was it the 2nd century BC? My point is, there's no way you can explain the updating of Daniel. You've got two choices. Either the Bible is God's inspired word, or the Jews found a very clever way to counterfeit the book of Daniel. And I believe what we just read is future. Daniel will be proven true in the future. No doubt about it. But there's just too many details for it to be false. By the way, the book of Daniel's in several different languages, I think including Chaldean, Hebrew, and Aramaic. Now, if you were creating a counterfeit for the Jewish synagogues, why would you put it in different languages? As a matter of fact, part of it is written by Nebuchadnezzar about his experiences. I don't have to go through all of it, but it's in 3 languages, depending on what was happening to Daniel at parts of his life and experiences. It's hard to explain that in making a counterfeit, isn't it?
it just doesn't seem practical. You know, you would expect if it were a counterfeit, it were specifically written for the Jews, presented exclusively in Hebrew. You know, what's the point of burying it up? Certainly, if
Plus,
it's not used as an excuse, you know.
and some of those languages are tricky. 5 centuries would have changed a lot. You sure they could write Chaldean accurately 5 centuries later? I don't know. I'm just saying it's not as easy as it sounds.
Yeah.
So the book of Daniel is authenticated, proves the Bible is true, and what we have to strive for is a deeper understanding of it.
What I really like the fact in these stories from the book of Daniel that God got to the emperors of Babylon and the emperor of Persia. You know, Nebuchadnezzar acknowledges God, you know, wholeheartedly. After, I mean, it took a lot. Obviously, it took a lot, but he did, as did the emperors of Persia, and look what they were able to do and allow the temple to, you know, essentially fund it, allow it to happen, and fund the return from captivity and the rebuilding of the temple and all that. And I just like that at the center of, you know, the spiritual battles that we've talked about, in the center of all the swirling and everything that's gone on, God prevailed. You know, when it mattered, when it was down to something that was going to make the difference to how history went, you know, God prevails in those moments, even if things don't go very well the rest of the time. Sometimes, you know, there's a lot of bad stuff on the edges and in between. But when it comes down to it, when something needs to happen, he's going to get it done.
Gotcha. By the way, in the story of Esther may prove to be, one man said it's a factor. She was queen mother, and she may have influenced some of those men who became emperor in the Persian Empire to look kindly toward the Jews. Now, the Bible does not say that, but can't you see where that's a good possibility?
It makes logical sense. And how much
So
farther can we
I
go
was
than that?
like,
I mean, you know, how much farther?
one thing about Esther, I think you can come out of the book with, Esther was beautiful, but she also was likable, charming, or something, whatever word that fits that. Does that make sense? And that's why she was chosen over probably 30 or 40 other attractive women, because she had a certain something, charisma, charm, smart, something. And so God worked everything out to fulfill his prophecy. And how was Daniel to know all that in the middle of was that the 6th century BC? Get it, whatever it is, because they're counting down, it gets you confused. You know, it counts down to 0. But anyway, that 5 centuries before BC, you know, that is something to think about.
And you know, you're saying that this stuff that he reported, but at the very end, it's interesting because it says, although I heard, I did not understand. Then I said, Lord, what shall be at the end of these things? And he said, go your way, Daniel, for the words are closed up and sealed till the time of the end. I mean, that's nothing can challenge or change God's word. It is what it is, and he does not lie. You know, that's one of the things, you know, I have very little, I mean, I don't say very, I have no trouble believing God's word. He will do what he says, and he has a plan. That's like a no-brainer, I think. You know, I know a lot of people want to challenge it, but
one thing I believe, that America can't be the hegemony power player in the world in the end time, or you'd see it. So America's going to decline in power just like Britain has. But if America were to repent, maybe we could have a soft landing instead of a hard landing. Now, I don't think that's going to happen. I look at the people who lead our society morally, the media leaders, the legal leaders, the academic leaders, the Hollywood leaders, and they're all pretty ungodly, would you, in a general sense?
oh yes, everyone who worships this false way. It's interesting. Y'all were sitting there talking. My mind's kind of going in places, but it's, Satan is the big counterfeiter. He tries to make a counterfeit story of what God is doing. But it's interesting when you look at like the beast and the whore that rides it. That's that they don't like each other. And you look at God's plan. It's like there's two women that are described in this book, right? There's a bride and a harlot. When you look at the harlot belongs to Satan and the bride belongs to Christ, to God. And you sit there and you look, God loves his creation. He wants to redeem us all. He wants to have a family. And Satan wants to destroy. And you see what, I guess, I don't know, his idea of what, a woman is, whereas God's idea, and we're using that figuratively, 1 Corinthians 11, Paul explains, God and Christ and mankind is like, when he created man and woman in the garden, that's a model. That's a model for what's going on a big spiritual level. But it's interesting when you look at Satan's version of that. He's got a whore.
I'd never thought of it that way, Jason. That's a good point, though. Yeah.
I talked about that a long time ago. The bride and the harlot, the comparison.
Yeah.
By the way, next week, because I think the anchors are, we already talked about creation, that there had to be a creator God last weekend. This week we were talking about the Bible is his word. And I think the next one we ought to hit, and maybe we might spend more than one session on it, is what is the test commandment? And I won't tell you what it is. I'll let you all think about it. And we'll cover it hopefully next Friday, God willing. What is the test commandment?
Sounds good to me. We didn't have any news to cover this week, or did we pretty much take care of that?
Well, I don't know. Anything that you can think of. But I guess America's strategy in the Middle East is tit for tat. But that's not really a strategy. That's why I think America's leadership in the world is declining, and really declining. I don't know. And the world hates a vacuum. Well, at some point, will Europe step into that vacuum? Obviously, I'm not naming dates. It could be many years away, but I don't know. What do you think, Michael?
Yeah, in these strikes, for instance, which we carried out with it's us and Britain, pretty much for the most part, doing the work on the ground there against the Houthis last couple of days. Some of the other nations, they didn't want to participate. France didn't want to participate. I think they're concerned about an escalation. They're really busy trying to keep things tamped down inside of Lebanon, which is their former protectorate and all right. That they've got close relations there. And Israel has struck into Lebanon, struck some Hezbollah commanders and stuff like that. And they're mad. And I mean, if you saw the pictures of the Houthis out there in Yemen today after these strikes, there are a lot of them, and they are mad, stomping our flags. And, one of their slogans, if you see their little board and it's got 5 lines or whatever, the 3 in the middle are about hating us and Israel and we're the great Satan and so on and so forth. It's very much, the hatred of us is very much wrapped up in that. Spain is sort of on the fence about participating. Italy's like, oh, well, we got to go to Parliament if we're going to help. We got to get approval first. So they can't, though they're contemplating, maybe more European joint missions in there. Rishi Sunak, the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, was in Ukraine today. I thought that was kind of interesting. It's they did a bunch of glad handing and what did they call it? Forget what they call the bill. It's not, it's not like a treaty or anything like that, but it's like a security guarantee, I think is the word, were the words used. Something, security deal, something like that. It means a bunch more money for the Ukraine than they gave last year. But interesting language, I thought, was that, Rishi's commitment to protecting Ukraine until they were able to join NATO. That's pretty straightforward. And at this point in time, things are not going great in Ukraine. Even the stuff that tries to spin it positively is saying, oh, they're switching to a defensive posture. They're digging lines farther back than you would think maybe that they should be at this point in time to prepare for Russia coming on, because Russia is again taking the initiative there. And where all that ends is hard to see. It's hard to see.
Yeah. So all I'm saying, American leadership is looking a little shaky, but it's still there to some extent because America is still, I think we still have the world's soundest economy because China has problems. We just don't hear about them.
Yeah, some major
And they need us to buy their
financial.
stuff.
Go ahead, Michael.
I was just adding, and they need us to buy their stuff.
Yeah, that's for
Yeah,
sure.
that too. Yes.
That matters.
Some financial institution, I don't remember what it was, issued a dire warning about our financial, the United States financial health, I guess. I didn't get a chance to look at it, but somebody did. And I don't know. We'll see what happens this year. It's already starting out messed up, and we're going to see how messed up it can get by, you can only imagine by election day what things are going to look like. We'll look back and say, we had no idea this was coming.
I did hear some bad news in the last 10 months in the labor report. They give a labor report, then they come back 4 or 5 weeks later, and they either downgrade it or upgrade it, once they get more details. 10 months in a row, they had to downgrade the labor report. In other words, our government overestimated the amount of jobs gained 10 months in a row. Normally, you'd think it'll up, down, too high, too low, too high, too low. Always up. Now, that could either be one or two things, incompetence or felony.
It's both.
Larceny.
It's both.
What do you say it was, Ken?
It's both.
Guess it both. Bunch of incompetent felons.
That's right. That's really true.
Yeah.
I mean, if you think about it,
Yeah.
that's what we got running our show right now. But hey,
So that does not give you a good feeling about the future economy. I think that's why the stock market is getting rocky. I'm not saying anybody can be sure, but we're probably in a very mild recession now, but it could be a stronger recession or worse as the years go on, or maybe it'll stay like it is and won't be too bad, and they can kind of gloss over the truth, and the American people think, oh, things are good. And so that's pretty much, it's going to be one of those three. If I were guessing, I'd say we're going to have some level of depression, but they'll try to gloss over the truth so a lot of people won't know
yeah.
the truth. You'll just know that somehow prices don't seem right and companies seem unstable and not sure about their future. Wonder why when the economy is so good.
Yeah. They'll be gaslighting us right and left in the next 8, 10.
Yeah.
Well,
I can't wait.
No, yeah. I went to a hotel
So looking forward.
a few weeks back, and they had their internet was horrid, but their cable was almost non-existent. And the woman was trying to gaslight me at the desk, telling me, "Well, we got the Weather Channel. Seriously, I'm supposed to get excited about the Weather Channel? Whoa, I get to see the Weather Channel." I think I am at the wrong hotel. It was a fancy hotel too. It was a really nice place. No, I'm in the wrong place. Anyway, I think we've come to the end of the program. Sorry to end on a low note, but anyway, hope everyone enjoys the rest of your probably very cold Sabbath, and windy and blustery and maybe snowy, depending on where you're at. Stay warm, everybody, and we'll see you back here next week. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
yeah, I can.
We're happy you could make it, and so glad you are here, and hope that we've been able to make God's word more clear. Until next time, may God be with you in everything you try. But for now, till next week, we have to say goodbye.